Meeple Nation Podcast, episode 376, Deduction Games.
Welcome, citizens of Meeple Nation. For the next 30 minutes, sit back and enjoy.
Meeple Nation is sponsored by GameToppersLLC.com. Have you ever wondered the mystery of how to get the games on your table to fit better?
Yes.
Game Toppers LLC can help you to deduce the right answer.
I like how you threw deduce in there.
I tried so hard, I thought for like 30 seconds. That's hyper speed for my brain. Game Toppers, they can help you solve that mystery. Check them out.
Welcome to Meeple Nation. We are your hosts. I am Andy Holiday.
I'm Nathan Howard.
I'm Dave Holiday.
And I'm Logan Howard.
I don't know if you've checked it out yet, but we have a new website. Lots of good stuff on that website. You can see all of our episodes on there. We actually have started putting out weekly blogs as well that you can check out and read and leave any comments on the blogs, how you liked them or maybe didn't like them or any other comments that you may have. And there's photos that you can check out as well. We have our bios on there, so check it out. It's meeplenation.com.
This week we are discussing games that require player deduction. When we were first talking about this, games that came to my mind were those old school games like Clue. We're all familiar with Clue. Well, I don't know if we're all familiar with Clue. But Clue is a game that's been around for a long time. You use that deduction to try to find the murder, the weapon they used, and the room that the murder occurred in. Basic deduction. You had to communicate with other players, find out what they had. And another deduction game, a classic from way back when, is Guess Who? One where you ask players questions. You each have a set of individuals, and you're trying to figure out which individual I have as opposed to the individual that my opponent has. But we're not going to talk about those games. In fact, we already talked way too much about those games. We're going to talk about cool games.
Really?
Really.
Okay, but for just a moment, before we move on from those old school games, Clue is a game that came out, as you said, a long time ago. But do you know how long ago?
I remember playing it as a kid, so it's at least before the 70s.
On BoardGameGeek.com, it has it listed at 1949. So it's been out a couple of years.
I was reading Andy's blog that's coming out in a few weeks. He talks about older games that I was really surprised how long ago those games came out. Like Sorry, and I believe Sorry was 1932.
So did Sorry come out before Parcheesi? Do you know?
You have Board Game Geek right there.
The thing that I was thinking about with this, though, is Clue, this type of game, the deduction, whether or not it was the motivation behind some of the newer games, the idea behind some of these newer deduction games. It certainly seems as though Clue spawned a huge genre of games. Right?
Absolutely. We look at a lot of those games that we put down or dog on, like Monopoly. How many games have been produced that use similar mechanics in Monopoly? I don't want to give Andy's whole blog away, but kind of what Andy talked about is some of those classics. Yeah, we might not like those classics now. Those classics are responsible for giving us what we have today. Without games like Clue, Monopoly, Sorry, Risk, Risk was even in the 50s, we wouldn't have what we have today. And so we got to have those classics.
The interesting thing is, so we all played Clue as kids, right? There was a few other deduction games out there, but there really weren't very many. Whereas you look at board games now that have a deduction element to them, there is a very large number of games that have that. All the hidden roll games are going to have some sort of deduction to them. And there's a lot of hidden roll games out there.
To a point, too. It's not even just deducing hidden rolls. A lot of games keep victory points secret. So you have to deduce to yourself, how many times did he do this action to get this many victory points? Am I behind if I do this, if I take time to go this strategy to try and get more points in the long run? Like, you have to think about, do I have time to do that? Because it's not open knowledge to everybody.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's interesting how broad this mechanic has been applied to games. You say, oh, well, it's got deduction in it. My goodness, that can mean anything. There's a lot of things that you can have to deduce in a game, what kind of information you're trying to figure out.
I remember that's what Nate was saying with Charterstone. It was so difficult to play on your phone is that you actually can't see what everybody else is doing, which I completely understand because Charterstone itself is a very complex board game of like lots of stuff going around, people pursuing different strategies. On the phone, there's not enough space to keep track of everything. I think it would be different if it was like on Steam or Yucata or something, but on your phone, there's just not enough space. I played it a few times on my phone. I just had to knuckle down and play my game and hope it came out on top at the end. I literally could not see what everybody else was doing.
So let's talk about some of those games that are out there. Coup is a game that Meeple Nation talked about our very first episode. It's a game, each player has 2 rolls in front of them. Those rolls are face down, and you can say you have whatever roll you want, and then take the action that is involved with that roll. The other players have the opportunity to call your bluff on that. There's 3 copies of each roll. When the 4th player starts to claim that they're the Duke, then everybody's questioning. But at that same point, there's 3 copies of that Duke out there, so you don't necessarily know when to call shenanigans on that until you have more information, like more cards are getting flipped over, or you're going to step out on that limb and make that guess and say, Logan, you don't have the Duke, or Dave, you don't have the Duke.
Which sometimes you have to do.
Yes.
Sometimes in Coup, you just have to do it. If you have the Duke, you gain extra money. That's getting you towards just wiping somebody out, one of their characters. So you just had to get to 7 or 8 coins to wipe out somebody's character. One of their identities, I guess I should say. Faster they do that, the faster somebody has all that power. So somebody has to start calling it somewhere. Sometimes I've played that game with people, and immediately after somebody calls the Duke, they're like, no, you got to prove that. Yeah. And it's worked out, and it's failed. You just need information, and that's what's hard with those types of games.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And the Resistance is another game that is very similar to that. The active player is the team leader. They try to form a team of what they hope are reliable players that are going to successfully pass a mission. Everybody that's on that team is going to play one of the 2 cards in their hand. One is a success, one is a fail. Those cards get handed in, they get shuffled up and revealed. And if there's a fail in there, they fail the mission. And that means one of the players on that team was not loyal. It's quick, and it's one that we played numerous times early on when it was first out. Right in hand with that is Don't Mess with Cthulhu and Time Bomb Evolution, which are games that I really enjoy. Really enjoy playing Time Bomb Evolution with Brent, especially when it's early in the morning.
Cranky Brent is funny Brent.
Yes. Many fond experiences of playing those games where your players are either loyal, they're not loyal, they're either cultists or they're investigators in Don't Mess with Cthulhu, or they're part of the SWAT team, or they're a terrorist in Time Bomb Evolution. The games are very similar, designed by the same designer. Both of those games, the deduction of trying to associate who am I going to put on my team, or is this player going to go looking for an Elder Sign, or are they going to go look for Cthulhu, or are they going to look for a bomb that's going to lose us the game. All those games are really fun, quick, simple, get to the table. And Andy, would you consider those games party games? Because I know you don't like fun games.
Partially they would be party games, but they're on the more fun side of party games, I would say. You're not doing stupid things. You're doing more fun things. So they would be funner party games, I would say. Right. But yes, I think they would still fall in the category of party games.
This category of game for me it's not my favorite. And I'm actually excited about that because I'm always feeling bad that for the most part, I just like games, right? I don't feel like I'm picky enough, maybe.
That
like
being
I
said,
always
Dave,
talk about, oh yeah, I love this. And so I'm glad that I can finally say, yeah, this is not my favorite.
But you and Nathan have been playing a lot of PI online. And
right.
That's a deduction game.
Right.
Very much a deduction game.
It's okay. I like that one better than most deduction games. But mostly I just enjoy playing online with Nate. There are plenty of other games that I would say, hey, let's play that instead, really. But Nate's the one who invites me to play. So.
There you go.
It's different from deduction of Ultimate Werewolf versus
yes, absolutely.
Salem versus PI.
That's part of it for me.
One of my pet peeves with playing Ultimate Werewolf and Blood on the Clock Tower is somebody makes an accusation and they're like, I'm the villager or I'm the pacifist. They just throw out something. So, okay, we believe you. Whoa, wait.
You never believed me.
What sort of evidence is that? There's nothing to go back to it. So that's why I like games that take that just a little step further. Salem, for instance, we played it at Hug a MeepleCon, and we've played it many times. One of the things I like it better than just Werewolf, it has the cards. It has something physical so then you can actually back it up. It's knowledge of, if the witch card started over here with David, then it totally could have moved over here in theory over this way. So then we can actually prove the theory instead of just, I'm not a witch. Well, they said they're not a witch, so I guess we just pack up and play another game.
Kind of how they did it in the real trials, though. They would come up and they'd say, hey, Andy's a witch. Andy would say, I'm not a witch. And there wasn't anything, weigh as much as a duck, or do you float like wood? Then you're a witch.
That game is also ranking higher than a lot of others for me. The one thing that I love about that game is just how much it really does channel the emotion of what I would expect that would be there. Because of the accusations and the, no, it's not me, I'm not. And then, just how it plays out. I've only played it the one time at Hug a Meeple Con. But just the way that I could see all that going down and everything, I was like, oh my gosh, this is probably like very similar to how that was then.
And I would imagine that is the case with more people. And maybe the people you're playing with. I thoroughly enjoyed that game and I wasn't even playing.
Yeah.
I just was kind of the moderator in that game. I was perfectly okay with that. It was absolutely entertaining just to watch that game be played. In fact, I think I'd rather watch it than play it.
That was a very intense game, and there was a lot of accusation and a lot of argument. It almost sounded like it was heated at times. I'm going to put down in my book is that was probably the most enjoyable game of Salem I've ever played, and I've had a lot of fun. And it's always been that when we're getting together with Hug, that was an amazing game of Salem.
The deduction in that game is so much better than Werewolf in my mind because there's a lot of back and forth and arbitrary, well, I'm not a witch, well, or whatever going back and forth. But then you can actually follow it up. Okay, well, there's a witch somewhere, so we're going to have to find them. I like that actual evidence of following it up. When people say, well, I'm the pacifist, and so that's why I always vote to save people. Okay, that's cool. Just because you said it doesn't mean anything. So many people, when you play games like that, are like, oh, okay.
On the other side of this, again, come back to part of the reason why these are not my favorite types of games. I don't like player elimination. That game can be incredibly fun as long as you're playing. To Andy's point, though, it was fun watching as well. That added to the enjoyment there. And it made it a little bit better than other games with player elimination. Like, I don't know how many times in Bang got eliminated before I ever got a turn. And then I was just on the Xbox, waiting for everybody else to finish. And sometimes it went on forever. For me, games like that, I'm just not a big fan of. Whether it's me getting eliminated or I'm just feeling bad for whoever else just got it. When I think of deduction games, I think of games like Werewolf and that, where that is a big piece of it. And that, for me, probably is part of the downer.
And I'm kind of with you, Dave. Most of the games that are on the list for deduction games aren't typically games that I really enjoy. But you and I, our likes on games are very similar.
Right.
They align quite well. But there are some, like PI, I thoroughly enjoy. I'm not a huge fan of hidden role games. I have fun playing them, but it's not one of my go-tos.
Mm-hmm.
But there's some on here that actually I thoroughly enjoy, like Obscurio. I love Obscurio. I think it's a great game.
Obscurio, Mysterium. See, those types of games, they have deduction, but it's so, I don't know, it's so out there. It's kind of hard.
Abstract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That it works both ways. You have to try to get into the head of the ghost. As a ghost, you're trying to think as the person you're giving the clues to. It's so hard in that game because you only get so many cards and they literally don't mean anything half the time.
I think that's one of the great elements about Mysterium and Obscurio and One Key and Dixit are all very similar with that experience. You have to understand that as I'm guessing, I'm not guessing what makes sense to Nathan. I'm guessing at what makes sense to Andy, because Andy's the clue giver, and so I have to decide, is this what Andy's thinking? But then you're absolutely right, Logan, because Andy's trying to give me clues to say, what's Nathan thinking? Played that game in the past where some people are big on colors. Okay, this artwork has some of the similar colors as, the suspect, the murder weapon. Some players go for color, and then some people go for symbols, what's in the background. And what matches on the card matches on the artwork that goes with their card. It's frustrating when you're the clue giver and you're like, these clues are perfect, but the audience is going for like something completely different. So I got great symbolism that's in this artwork that matches perfectly with your suspect, but you're totally stuck on, well, this is green. There's some green faded in the background. There's green on this card too. And there might be green there, but there's a perfect symbolism there. And it's very frustrating to try to keep quiet as the ghost or as the grimoire in Obscurio. It's kind of frustrating to be able to give those clues and have the guessee go in a completely different direction. You're like,
I love being the ghost in Mysterium. Part of that is trying to read. For example, I know that Nathan's going to look for colors, so I'm going to try to find colors first that are going to match what I'm trying to show you, and then maybe go with symbols or a theme or something like that. Totally adds to the difficulty of being the ghost and the fun. Trying to get people to guess that and give good clues, that's the challenge. That's the whole point of the game, and I love it. I think it's great.
I think the most frustrating thing with being the ghost in that game is Nathan, 2 clues ago, was talking about colors, and so I put colors out, and now he's talking all about symbols, and I'm just like, Dude, like, stick with the subject.
I kind of do that too when I'm player, not the ghost. I'm all over the place. So I'm trying to, like you said, trying to get in the head of the ghost. So what exactly they're trying to give me? Is it a color? Because that color is really close, or do I need to look at something else in that card?
And then when both the player and the ghost switch gears, it's like in that example you said, like, you're going for colors. So now I'm going to give you colors. And all of a sudden the player's like, well, you were going for symbols, so I'm going to look for symbols now. And you're like, oh, you idiot. Just go for what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, we need to play that one again.
Yeah, those are both really good games. Something that's similar is The Chameleon, Spyfall 2. These are where you have the odd player out, right? Everybody else in the group knows the room that we're in, or they know the answer in Chameleon. One player doesn't have that information. Then players provide information about the room that they're in, or the clue that they're trying to solve. So like in The Chameleon, everybody has to provide an answer really quick. Just go in turn order, and it'd be rapid fire, like, give me a clue for the answer as you go around, which always is terrible if you're the first one and you don't have that answer. Later on, and it's pretty easy to pick up and you can blend in, hopefully. Spyfall is the same way, where there's several rooms out there. I would try to ask Dave a vague question, like, what do you think about what Joe's wearing? Dave will have to interpret that. Dave could answer with something like, I don't think the fur goes with the color of his eyes very well, or something like that. That information crosses back forth to us that, okay, maybe I know that Dave's talking about the right spot, where I could have been talking about something completely different. Or we hopefully will get that blended information that my question was vague enough to Dave and Dave's answer was vague enough to me that we're like, oh yeah, we're talking about the same room. Whereas the spy was going to have to wing it. He's going to say, like, oh, I don't like the sand in my shoes. I'm thinking to myself, sand in my shoes? We're in the Alps. What are you going to have sand in your shoes? Those games have their place for sure. Even games like Potemkin Empire, where we were building buildings. We didn't know if those buildings were fake buildings, just facades, or if they're real buildings. And as we tried to go through and make guesses and identify false buildings or fake buildings, not falsely identify fake building as a real building. We only played that game the one time, but I had fun with it. We had kind of a bad shuffle.
Yeah.
But other than that, I still thought the game was really fun.
Yeah, I think that's one we should probably play again. We just need to get the cards shuffled better so we had a little bit wider variety of cards.
I don't know, maybe I'm the odd man out. Not that I don't think it would be an okay game if we had a good shuffle, but we have great games, so why am I going to settle with an okay game?
That's true.
Decrypto is one that I'm thinking of, Nathan, that exactly what you were talking about with Spyfall.
It's very similar.
You're just giving clues, and it gets more difficult as the game's going on, to where clues that your team understands what words or in what order you need to put it in without giving away the information to the other teams. You're trying to be vague enough to confuse the other team, but not too clever to confuse your team and lose, which is where my team normally loses, is because I'm far too clever for my own good.
With Decrypto, your team has the answers. You're trying to give those vague clues. You have 4 words that you're going to give 3 clues to, and your team's got to guess the order of your clues. But then you need to make that vague enough so that opposing team can't start to associate your clues with words, because they're trying to decipher that order. Decrypto is a great game, and it's a game that I, again, would consider a party game, but I would consider it very fun.
Yeah, we did this in a barbecue last year with our spouses. What a fun time. I really had a fun time playing this one.
I think it's because it blends the line from party game to actual game very well, where it's very approachable, but then it has those layers that make it very much fun.
Yeah, I mean, there's actual thought and decisions in what exactly you want to do in it, whereas a party game that's fairly limited on as far as the strategy of what you want to do or how you want to go about trying to give the clues. I thought it was great. I know that Sabrina really loved it. It seemed like all had a good time playing that. One of the 2 games that my wife brought into our marriage was Mind Trap. This is a very simple game. You essentially have a die, a 6-sided die. It has 3 ones on it, a 3, a 2, and a 0. It has a little score pad, a ton of cards. And all of these cards are clues. And it's kind of like each card's a little mini mystery. And there's some that are pretty simple, straightforward, and others that have a little diamond over the top of them that are more complex, almost a longer mystery. For example, one of the cards has an easy clue. It's what crime is illegal if you attempt it, but not illegal if you successfully commit. And so you have to figure out what that is. Maybe more of a difficult clue is a girl knocks the queen over and cuts her face. The police stop the girl, but don't press any charges. Why were the police so lenient? And it was just a picture of the queen. She knocked it off the wall, glass cut the queen's face. Figure this out, and there's 2 teams. If you successfully figure it out, you get a point, or there's a little bit of pressure luck element to this. You can roll the die. If you roll the die, you get whatever point shows up on the die face. If you roll the die, you get most likely to get 1 point, 50% chance to get 1 point, but one of the die faces has a 0 on it, so there is a chance that you could score 0.
So I'm curious, what is a crime that...
If you're successful, it's not illegal. If you just attempted, it is illegal. Suicide.
Huh.
Technically, it's still illegal. It's just they can't
press any charges.
That sounds like it's really just a bunch of riddles, right?
That's exactly what it is.
Trying to solve the riddles. It's kind of fun.
Most of the time when we play this game, we actually don't use the die. We play this game on road trips. We're driving long road trips. Sabrina will pop open the box, and she's just throwing out clues. It's really been a great game to kill the time while we're driving down the highway on a 12, 16, however long road trip we're doing. Lots of fun riddles in it. Some of them are really tough, though. Like, how in the world would we have even gotten that? You kind of got to think out of the box on some of them. The more you play it, the more you're thinking out of the box on some of the riddles and mysteries that you're given.
I've had this game forever. Got it at a surplus store for $1. Never opened it.
This week, Nate, we should play.
Good times. So we get into the bigger games. One of my favorite games, Battlestar Galactica, where you're trying to deduce, is Dave a Cylon?
Mm-hmm.
And if he is a Cylon...
The appropriate question is Nathan a Cylon, and should I blow him out the airlock?
The real important question is, how many Cylon cards is Nate going to deal out?
So am I really a Cylon?
Battlestar Galactica and Shadows over Camelot, 2 of my favorite hidden role games, which falls right in line with Deduction Games, as you're trying to decide who's a Cylon, who's loyal, who's a traitor, and who's a loyal knight. Both of these games, I find them very similar. Obviously, there's differences, but the overall game idea I find very similar, and I enjoy both these games immensely.
A newer game that built off of the same strategy for those bigger games like that is Nemesis.
Yeah.
I actually like Nemesis a lot with its, you're dealt 2 objective goals, almost the hidden role. Your objective determines your victory. You have 2 objectives in front of you, and you get to pick one or the other. Should I try and kill Logan? Nathan likes to pick that one. Or should I, find a whole bunch of stuff? You get to pick your strategy instead of you're just a traitor, so you have to do this.
And the great part about that is, as your teammate / opponent, that's what I'm trying to deduce, right? Am I helping Logan? Or do I need to be more selfish and focus on just what I'm doing? Because I'm worried that Logan's going to betray me. But that great game that we had, Logan, where I convinced you to help me complete my quests. And then once we completed my quest, it was like, well, I just need to make sure Logan dies. So I'm gonna kill Logan now.
Well, I think that's what's so great about that game is there's not a guaranteed traitor because there's not an actual traitor card, right?
Right.
It's just somebody's goals are different than my goals. Sometimes they need to be the only survivor. Sometimes they just need to eliminate one player. Sometimes they're just collecting things. There's more levels of nuance of should I trust them or not. But because of that experience, I played another game where I was like, I'm done. I'm out, guys. I got my personal goal. See ya. My character escaped. Just jumped in the escape pod and was out of there. The game went on for another hour, but I won.
Another game that's kind of similar to that is Dead of Winter, where you have players who you may or may not have a traitor in there. But at the same point, each player is going to do selfish or treacherous things, going back and forth. Do I trust what Logan's doing? Do I trust what Dave's doing? Or is Andy the one that we really need to worry about? Because Andy's hoarding all the medicine. We know he has medicine, and twice we've needed it. Andy hasn't been willing to share the medicine.
Andy's never the one you have to worry about.
It's always Dave.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
This is a game that we discussed a little bit back in October for our Halloween episode. You guys have tried to play this once a year. This is one that I've wanted to play once a year during every Halloween, but I haven't been able to get people to play it.
We will this year.
Yes, absolutely. It's Fury of Dracula. When we played this in October, I forgot how long this game can be. It really can be a long game. One player plays Dracula, everybody else is a hunter. And you are going throughout Europe trying to find and defeat Dracula. Really, the deduction part of this is just trying to find the trail of Dracula, trying to figure out where in the world he is. And that's really what takes the most time in the game. Dracula's playing his cards, throw you off his trail.
So once we discover his trail, if we don't deal with the hideout, the trap, whatever it is, if we don't deal with it, consequences towards the end. Dracula, he has his opportunities, playing his card, as you were saying, is distractions, bluffs, as actual hideouts. If we don't find the trail, by the time it gets off the board, Nathan gets certain bonuses like extra health, damage.
This is one of those games where I played as Dracula and as the hunters, and I enjoy playing Dracula so much more than being a hunter in this. There's just a lot more thrill to it as you're trying to get away, and that was close, but nobody else knows it how close they were. It just seems like a lot more fun being Dracula in this.
Yeah, I've been Dracula every time I've played, not on purpose, but as the cards were dealt. If I'm Dracula ever again, Dracula is going to be far more aggressive, not just running away, which made our last game last forever. Kept trying to run away, but Dracula doesn't get any benefits from running away. He's got to attack the hunters. He's got to get points other ways. Otherwise, it's just hide and seek. Dracula can continue to stay ahead. Just become a really boring game of chase down Dracula.
I think it needs to be a little bit of both. In order for Dracula not to just get absolutely decimated, you've got to separate the hunters. And if you can manage to get one hunter by himself to where you know you can attack him and you have your escape route right after you attack him so you don't get ganged up on, you get ganged up on by hunters and you're done. But if you can get one by himself, you have a very high chance of defeating that hunter.
At first, you have to take out one hunter. As that hunter recovers, you get a chance to hopefully build up that hideout and get some of those cards up while the other hunters are looking for you.
At that point, it's a risk-reward. Do I let these fall off the mat and just chase down Dracula where I think he's going? If you're hit-and-run type tactics, it's, does he need these to come off, or is it just a distraction? We wasted plenty of time, I remember last time we were playing, trying to deal with a whole bunch of hideouts in England. Nathan was gone, but we're like, we got to deal with these hideouts. And
that's kind of the balance. Sometimes you split up. We think we know where Dracula is, so these two hunters are going to go after Dracula, and the other two are going to figure out what his trail is so these cards don't drop off.
As you're considering the player count. I mean, if you're playing a 2-player game, those hideouts are going to be easy to kick out. But when you play with 4 hunters out there, it's definitely harder for Dracula to hide from 4 hunters. One last one that I want to talk about before we're out of time here is one of my favorite deduction games. Although I've only played it once, to call it my favorite might be a long stretch. But one that I had a very enjoyable time playing was Spectre Ops. One player is trying to infiltrate compounds and get out while there's hunters on the board. Very similar to Fury of Dracula. It's a future theme. If the Spectre ever crosses one of the hunter's paths, so the hunter could have a clear shot of it, then that exposure comes out. And so it's all about trying to hide and get to 4 checkpoints and make it back off the board before the hunters catch him. The Spectre player is going to be writing on a notepad all his or her movements so that it can be tracked. If path is ever crossed by the hunters, the Spectre would have to reveal that they crossed that path. Really enjoyed that game the time I played it. I believe I played Brent's copy. Have since picked up my own copy. I need to bust that out with you guys so you guys can also find out how much you enjoy Spectre Ops.
So before we quit, though, early on in the episode, we talked a little bit about a couple of classic games. Nate told me to use my computer to find the answer of which game was older. So we were talking about Sorry, which actually came out in 1929. But when I looked up Parcheesi, came out just a little bit before. On Board Game Geek, it says it came out in 400. But there were a couple of things that I found on the internet also that attributed it to 4. Apparently, maybe the national game of India. It's the game of India. Came out a long time before Sorry did. But that's pretty impressive that they came out with a game that really has had many different iterations of a very similar thing. Obviously, it wasn't throughout the centuries, but centuries later, it became a very popular game.
Just going off old games now, you got me curious. Chess came out in 1475. Apparently not as old as Parcheesi. However, Go, and I don't know how they track this, but minus 2200 BC. So
Nice.
So that game's been around for a long time.
Parcheesi stuff that I found. There was stuff that was talking about it also in the BCs. It would be interesting if one of you guys who has reading skills could find that out.
But the episode is over, so my interest in it is done.
I know. Right?
So those are the deduction games that we were talking about today.
can you deduce where Nathan will find you next?
Probably. But we'll find out next time.
So
until next time.
We'll see you looking for clues on that next episode. We'll see if you can deduce them.